All right, good morning and welcome everyone to the All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church Community Forum in Kansas City, Missouri. I am Joe Robertson, a member of the church and also a member of the forum committee. For this forum that for nearly 80 years has promoted critical thinking by seeking out important conversations on the most compelling and challenging issues of our day. Today, we welcome Cori Wallace, the Engagement Director for Della Community Services in Kansas City, here to talk about refugee crises and how Kansas City responds and what it tells us about our community. So, Cori, a lot has been going on, and so I guess it always has. So, Cori, welcome to the forum.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'm really excited to be here this morning. I can get started and then move to the slides in a minute. But before I really get started in earnest with some visuals, I should introduce myself. My name is Cori Wallace, and I serve Della Community Services as our Community Engagement Director. Essentially what that means is I build relationships all over the city, and I answer a number of questions for a number of different audiences about how they can best support the work that Della does. We're going to talk specifically about refugees and refugee resettlement this morning. But I do want you to know that Della has been in service to Kansas Cityans for 125 years. So we're an agency that's been around since the turn of the century. And this year we're celebrating 125 years of serving the vulnerable in Kansas City. And we have 4 core programs. Our first is Refugee Resettlement or Refugee Services. Our second is Early Childhood Education, where we have a facility where we serve 40 little learners, ages 0 to 4 years old, in hopes that they can meet their milestones in preparation for kindergarten. Our third program is social services. And when you think social services, I want you to think emergency. Those are services for people who need rental assistance, utility assistance, or assistance around the holidays. And our fourth and final program is youth services. And that's a sports program that supports more than 400 athletes aged 5 to 18. So we're super excited to be a part of a lot of different exciting things that are happening in Kansas City. And I'm very, very proud to work at Della, a place that I know is doing some really powerful things to support our city being a more welcoming city. I know that this community of people really understands the critical need to be a welcoming place. And so what we're going to talk today about is how we can be more welcoming as a community and how we can provide a more receptive environment for refugees to come here. There are a number of misconceptions about refugees and the refugee population. And so I hope to address those today too. And I'm going to wrap up with ways that you specifically can get involved, not just in Della, but in all of the organizations around Kansas City that care about welcoming the strangers. So let's dig in. The number one misconception about refugee resettlement is that if you really see a population of refugees on the news, they are a population of refugees that has reached critical mass. And that is absolutely false. You might have seen Ukrainian refugees moving out of the Ukraine on foot into Poland and into other parts of Europe. But what you're really seeing is a group of people who reflect the larger population of refugees, more than 29 million people who are displaced from their native countries right now. It's not just one place. It's not just Afghanistan. It's not just the Ukraine. It's the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's the Sudan. It's Somalia. It's Syria. It's not just one place. It's not just right now. It's anywhere where there's political conflict that places the blame on a group of marginalized citizens who did nothing to deserve displacement from their home. And so I receive a lot of questions, and I welcome those questions. I embrace those questions. We embrace them as an agency, but I receive a lot of questions about, what are we doing to support Ukrainian refugees? And my answer to most people is, we support all refugees, and we have welcomed 15 refugees just in the last week. We've welcomed 355 refugees in the last 4 months. We've welcomed over 1,500 refugees in the last 5 years. There's 78 million forcibly displaced people worldwide. Those are people without the legal designation of refugee necessarily, They're people that have just been forced to migrate from their home country. Now, what that means is, and I'm sure we understand like the biblical and litigious references around forcible displacement of large masses of people for a number of reasons. That does include undocumented immigrants. That does include immigrants who have moved, utilizing the law as a beacon for them to get to where they want to go. It does also recognize people that are displaced by war that believe they will return. It also recognizes refugees. Refugee is a legal term that's only extended to a very specific and select group of people. So when you hear the term refugee, please know that that person has pursued that legal designation and received that legal designation from the United Nations Council on Refugees. The UN Council on Refugees, or the UNCR, as it's most commonly referred to, is a body of people who really work to support the migration, the safe and healthy migration of more than 26 million people every single day. Now, what's so interesting about the UNCR is they're like any body of human beings. They can only manage a small select group of those refugees into safety. 40% of refugees are children. And we're seeing that in Kansas City as well. So when a group of refugees from Afghanistan land at the Kansas City International Airport, we are seeing those statistics smooth out. So 40% of those people that we've resettled, just our agency in Kansas City, have been children. We have had 4 women who are preparing to have babies. We've had 2 women already give birth. So we're talking about people who are living their lives and forced to depart with really no rationale and no warning. I will tell you that Afghan refugees don't have the legal designation of refugee. There's a number of different reasons for that. If I have any attorneys on the call, you'll know that legal designation means that you have a certain set of criteria that you need to meet in order to be labeled one thing or another. And Afghanistan, people who left Afghanistan left directly from Afghanistan. And one of the criteria to receive the legal label of refugee is that you are currently not in your home country, that you are seeking asylum elsewhere, or you've been given the legal designation of refugee as a result of your forced migration to another country. So we refer to Afghan refugees as parolees or evacuees. The connotation around parolee in the United States is a very different one. But when you think parolee, I want you to think in waiting. These are people in waiting of a legal designation. So out of these forcibly displaced 26 million people, fewer than 1% will make it through the entire process. So when you meet a refugee here in Kansas City, I want you to know you're literally meeting somebody who has beat insurmountable odds. There is no reason, no rhyme or reason to the people who make it all the way to their assigned place. And I will tell you that no one, absolutely no one, requests to go where they're going. So let's say you get placed in Lebanon. You have not requested Lebanon. You get placed in Kansas City, Omaha, San Antonio, Reston, Virginia, San Francisco. You haven't requested those communities. You've been assigned that community, and you are asked to go there, and you're given a ticket, and you and your entire family, if you were able to bring your family with you, go to an assigned place. So as much as we love our hometown, and as much as I love this city, and these people have not asked to come here. And so they're navigating a city that they have not requested, nor have they researched. It's not like going on a trip, and it's not like deciding to move. You literally are, physically dropped in the middle of the country. There are 3 agencies that do refugee resettlement in Kansas City. There are 3 accredited agencies that do resettlement in Kansas City. So that's us, Jewish Vocational Services, otherwise known as JVS, and Catholic Charities. The way refugee resettlement works in the United States is that there are 9 affiliate networks of refugee resettlement agencies. And under that network, there are associated agencies that partner with their 9 parent organizations. We're under one parent organization known as ECDC, JVS is under another, and Catholic Charities is under a third. So we all serve different assigned refugees. We have very little crossover, but we do the same work in parallel with one another. Della and JVS resettle refugees exclusively on the Missouri side of the state line, and Catholic Charities resettles refugees on the Kansas side of the state line. So all three of our agencies work with volunteers from all over the Kansas City metro. So you can work with us if you happen to be a Kansas resident. But we do only resettle refugees in housing on the Missouri side of the state line, if that makes sense. You might have heard of organizations like KC for Refugees, Once We Were Refugees, Rightfully Sown. There are a couple of organizations that are volunteer organizations that have gathered in support of refugees, and we work in partnership with those as well. But ourselves, Della, JVS, and Catholic Charities are the only accredited refugee resettlement agencies, and we are assigned cases much like any other social service agency. So we work in support of social service cases to support these incredible humans. So to more closely define a refugee, it's important to note that a refugee is always experiencing special humanitarian concern. They're always in crisis, in active physical crisis. They're able to demonstrate that they were persecuted due to their race, gender, another protected class status. For Afghan evacuees or parolees, most often they're able to demonstrate that they had a connection or relationship with the United States in some way, which makes them extremely vulnerable to Taliban persecution. What I want you to hear is, I think there's been kind of a misconception that if you are a special immigrant visa holder, meaning if you worked with the United States military or military contractor in Afghanistan, you have an SIV, and that makes it way more likely that you're able to get out of Afghanistan. That unfortunately is not the case. We were able to evacuate 70,000 people from Afghanistan. That's 70,000 men, women, and children. There are many, many people that are still there. Many, many people. We receive emails from them daily. If you are a refugee, you're clearly not firmly resettled in another country, and you're often displaced for months or even years. Let me provide a case that kind of illustrates that point. So before the fall of Kabul, we did resettle a family from Afghanistan. Families and evacuees from Afghanistan were coming to the United States for years prior to the fall of Kabul. And so we resettled a family that included a mother, her son, and her two twin girls who were 18, 19 years old when they came here. The two twin girls and the son had been in Lebanon for 10 years in a refugee apartment. So they'd spent more than half their life preparing to come to their assigned country that just happened to be the United States, and their city happened to be Kansas City, Missouri. The two twin girls, when they finally got to the United States, the first thing they asked for, which I thought was a sign of healing, and it just makes me smile even today. The first thing they asked for, because they're 19 years old, is Wi-Fi. They wanted to reconnect with their friends back in Lebanon. And so they asked for Wi-Fi in order to make sure that they could stay connected to their social networks, which I thought was absolutely age appropriate and really a sign of healing. So a refugee is not someone who is undocumented. So there are a number of different undocumented populations here in Kansas City also. Where there are human beings, there are undocumented people living and serving in this community. But a refugee is very documented. They are one of the most documented populations of people on planet Earth. Arguably, they have more documentation than just your standard Native American or your standard nativized American, I should say. Not indigenous person, but person who has been born in the United States. Really, you're one of the most documented people on Earth if you get the legal designation of refugee. They are not across our borders without strict regulation. When I tell you that every man, woman, and child has been vetted, vaccinated, health screened, medical screened, mentally screened, screened by a number of different entities, including the UNCR, Interpol, the Department of Homeland Security, in some cases, the CIA and the FBI, I wouldn't be overstating what they've experienced. A wealthy person, I think there's kind of maybe a perception that if you're rich, if you're wealthy, if you have means in Afghanistan or in another conflict rich area, that you could maybe leverage relationships, get yourself out of there. There is a cottage industry that's sprung up in conflict-rich areas of the world where people say, you know, give me $40,000 and I can extract your family from whatever area, Syria, you know, Afghanistan, now the Ukraine. Those are absolutely typically predatory industries. They're not rooted in any fact. And we do not do extractions. None of the refugee resettlement agencies in the United States do extraction work. So no amount of money is going to help you leave. In fact, the most people who we work with were people that literally felt like they had nothing to lose. They were people that were willing to leave everything behind in a moment's notice. And so we might be talking about middle-class folks who realized they needed to go, but we're not talking about wealthy people who leveraged relationships or money to get out. We resettled more than 40 what we call solo men. We don't call them single men because they're men that have been forced to leave their families behind. We're talking about multiple children, their wives, their mother and father-in-law, their own mother and father, and siblings. So there have been times where we've resettled men in Kansas City. They all, a large group of them wanted to live together. So they wanted to live in the same apartment complex so they could all support each other and begin to make money so they could potentially bring their family members to the United States. What that looks like for us is that we are constantly aware of the people that are not in the room that these refugees care about, right? So when we talk to someone who is agitated or worried or anxious or experiencing PTSD, it's largely because he or she have left someone behind. And every refugee is experiencing that. There's always a group of people that weren't able to come. And so we're conscious of that as well. So here's the role of Della Lamb specifically. So we've talked about the ongoing need to support refugees. We've resettled, like as I said earlier, 355 refugees from November into February. I think our last day of welcoming an Afghan was February 15th or 16th. But we continue to welcome refugees from all over the world. And we receive everything from assigned refugees to walk-in refugees, people who have come to Kansas City because they have an anchor relative here or because they were told that there was opportunity here. Refugees are able to leave their assigned agency. They're able to walk freely once they come into their assigned agency and start to receive services. There are a group of refugees who have discovered that there is a community. I did not know this until this past month. There's a community in Lexington, Nebraska, that literally, I believe the community essentially said, you know what, in order to save our town, we need to be more welcoming to people. And we need to be able to provide employees to our biggest employer, which happens to be a Tyson plant. So the Tyson plant has done, Tyson as a company has done an extremely strong and smart thing. They provide really incredible salaries, resources, working environments that are conducive to a practicing Muslim, translation services, a sign-on bonus, and a moving bonus to come and live in one of their communities that services a plant, a Tyson facility. And one of those plants is in Lexington, Nebraska. So we have a group of men and families who have heard about this from their friends in the refugee network and have decided to move. And so we will be going to Lexington to vet this opportunity, to look at the community and to make sure that it's everything that we believe that it is, that we're hopeful that it is. So please know that we are in constant we're constantly on the hunt for opportunities for refugees to not just arrive here, but thrive here, really get personal agency as quickly as they can, get independence as quickly as they can. This was always designed to be a public-private partnership. So a lot of people that I talk to remember the time of resettlement in the 70s and early 80s when Vietnamese people and Laotian people were coming to the United States. And if you remember that time in our nation's history, I think we really did some innovative things. to welcome refugees, but I think those were things that, that the communities just designed and kind of stitched together. So back in those times, there were people that were housing refugees in their private homes. We were housing refugees in parsonages and in church basements, and we don't really do that anymore. So one of the things that I've really had to learn a lot about is why people continue to call and ask me if they can house a refugee in their own private home. And I share this with any group that I work with, any group that I speak to, like I'm speaking to you this morning. We have really, really incredible opportunities to walk alongside refugees that are a more contemporary reflection of our commitment to trauma-informed best practices, our commitment to privacy, our commitment to autonomy. And so we no longer do some of the things that you might have remembered that we absolutely did in the 70s and 80s. One of those things is housing refugees in private homes. So if you have an extra room or you're thinking I have a basement suite where a refugee family can live, we no longer do that, but stay tuned. We have opportunities for you to support refugees. Kansas City is really an incredible place, and I am proud to call this town my home. I was raised here, grew up out south, went to Shawnee Mission South High School, and really didn't know a lot about the historic Northeast where Della Lamb is located until I was hired by Della Lamb, which is ironic because Della Lamb, from almost its inception, has been a mission of the United Methodist Church. I am a lifelong Methodist. I happen to be a lifelong Methodist. And I knew that Della Lamb existed, but I did not know where it was. And I didn't know about the history of the historic Northeast. And there are people on this call who I'm sure know about the history of the historic Northeast and know that it's a vibrant community filled with people from all over the world. And it didn't start that way, but now it has become one of the most diverse pockets of our city. It's right north of the Jazz District, of the 18th and Vine District, if you're curious, and right south of the river. It was the place where a lot of shipping magnates made their homes at the turn of the century. And now it reflects really the richness of our community. There are people living there from Afghanistan, Sudan, Somalia, Myanmar, the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's a huge, vibrant Congolese population in that part of the city. If you're curious where refugees live, really, refugees follow the patterns of other Kansas Cityans. Let me give you an example. Our office manager is from Somalia. Khadra is a refugee who resettled here about 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Her family was resettled here when her father, a Somali general, was forced to leave with his 5 kids and his wife. They made it to Kansas City, where they were resettled by Don Bosco, which at that time was a refugee resettlement agency. And they came here, they were resettled here, and they started in the Northeast. Khadra went to school, got her high school diploma, started working at Della Lamb, got married, had children of her own. And when her children became about school age, she moved to where a lot of young families are moving. She moved to Parkville, and that's where she's made her home. So the migratory patterns of refugees are very, very similar to people who start here with very modest means and then get elevated out of poverty and move north or move south. So if you were to visit the Islamic Center of Johnson County or the Islamic Center of the Northeast, those 2 mosques, those 2 communities, the people in those communities would tell you, I might have started here in Midtown or in the east side of town, but we have moved to reflect just the migratory patterns of many Kansas Cityans, of many generations. So here's our current work. We still will be resettling refugees when the Ukrainian conflict subsides or fades away from media coverage, and we will be resettling those from Afghanistan for many, many years. We work with others, and I've mentioned those other agencies in support of our work, but our work is focused on case service support. So every single refugee family receives a case manager. We have hired both Pashto and Dari speaking case managers. I think we've hired 6 in the last, 2 months, because those are the 2 languages that are primarily spoken by folks from Afghanistan, either Pashto or Dari. And we will continue to hire Swahili speakers because a lot of Congolese folks speak Swahili. So we offer a really focused amount of case management support for what we say is 90 days or more. So 90 days is the floor. It is the bare basic offering of services. And those 90 days are called resettlement and placement. The RNP process takes 90 days, and we have 3 key priorities during that 90-day period of time. It's getting children or adults enrolled in school, and that is including ELL classes, cultural orientation classes, and physical school. So an elementary school, a high school, middle school, or even college if they're interested in continuing their higher education. So that's the first goal. The second goal is housing, getting them placed in a house or an apartment that is family size and type appropriate. And then the third priority is employment, ensuring that they are able to get a job, receive employment, and begin to get paid. Initially, the stipend for refugees is about $1,300. It's a one-time stipend. And if you know anything about affordable housing in Kansas City, a 1-bedroom apartment, even on the east side, is going to run you about $750. If you don't have credit, like no refugee has a credit score because they've just been issued a social security number. If you don't have credit, then you're going to be asked to pay a 1-month deposit. That's a $750 deposit. You're going to be asked to pay 1 month's rent. In order to secure your utilities, sometimes you're going to be asked to place a deposit there. And if you do the math, your $1,300 stipend is already gone. So what we're really doing is ensuring that these people can continue to live in homes that are reflective of their needs and that they have everything that they need to begin to access services in Kansas City during those 90 days. We connect them with as many resources as we possibly can. That includes everything from driver's education to English language learning. And we offer case management that's rooted in trauma-informed care. So we think a lot about what people might need who've been on the run or who had to survive and had really a survival mentality for many, many months, even years. We're talking about a collection of people who, if you know anything about trauma, what happens to the mind when trauma is asserted on your person for even an individual event or for a longer period of time? What happens to your mind is you begin to look around and wonder what is available to you. Like if you can't see it or touch it, it's really not present and there's no comfort that's offered by it. So saying to a refugee, it will come, just be patient, that is a fool charade to a refugee. And it's understandable, right? It's absolutely understandable. People ask me all the time, how long does it take a refugee to gain independence? And I typically answer that question with another question. If you did not believe that the systems of government were going to save you, how long would you feel comfortable relying on the systems of government? Not very long, right? So I think most of the refugees are extremely motivated because they've seen systems fail them. And really the only system that they trust is themselves. Now, is that reflective of the incredible richness of America, the almost embarrassment of riches that we have as a culture? No, it's not. But we're talking about people who have been traumatized, right? And who have seen their government fail them. So they're not coming here expecting a free handout from the United States because everything in their world has been telling them, do not expect anything from anyone. Do not expect to be served. Do not expect to receive what you need. You have to find a way to get it yourself. And so we have a lot of very, very motivated people. The number one question we receive after, how can I get my family here, is when can I get a job? It's the number one question. And then if they have kids, the number 2 question that immediately follows that question is, when can my kids get enrolled in school? Because we're talking about all human beings just like you and I, right? If you had had your children who during the academic year had not gone to school for 2 or 3 months at a stretch, and you're seeing them get increasingly bored and restless, receive, you know, a lack of education when you value your education, it's extremely frustrating. And so assign that to the way refugees are thinking. They've seen their kids in refugee camps for months, in temporary housing for months. They want their kids enrolled in school. It's almost to me a sign of healing when a refugee knows to ask for something, because it means that they want and desire permanence. Co-sponsorship is one way that we work alongside Kansas Cityans who want to walk alongside refugees. And a co-sponsorship relationship is typically a relationship that lasts 9 months to a year, where you work with us. You are trained as a group. It's typically 7 to 10 people. And you are trained as a group to support refugees and provide them community access services. You build a relationship with their case manager, and you really build a relationship with them where they are able to find advocates and allies in their exposure to Kansas City and all of the things that we offer. Co-sponsorship is not, it's something that anyone can do. We suggest that you do it with a group of friends because we believe that it's more fun when you do it with a group of people, and you each take your own lane. Like one person takes school enrollment for the family and goes with the family to help them get enrolled in school. One person might take employment and you drive that family earner to a job interview where they then might secure their first job. There's lots of different things you can do to connect refugees to our community and ensure that they feel welcomed and embraced by Kansas Cityans. A lot of what the data is telling us and a lot of what our volunteers are telling us is some of the richest and most helpful relationships for refugees have been the relationships they've built with community members. And so we have an avenue for building those relationships, and it's called co-sponsorship. Whenever you are curious about how to help an agency like Della Lamb, I want you to hear a few things. We used to have a culture in this country where you could just drop things off in nonprofit organizations, right? You drop off a trash bag full of clothes, or you drop off, you know, materials that you didn't need anymore. I would ask you, please do not drop anything off anymore. Most nonprofit organizations no longer have the resources to sort, clean, store, and organize those materials. We no longer have a clothing pantry. We are partnered with the Salvation Army and other thrift stores to dress these people, and or we receive donations from corporations where we get new clothing for them. So what I would recommend doing is before you give a gift, please reach out to me. Please call me or email me and ask me, do you need this item? It's the best way for me to explain this is I receive 2 or 3 calls a week of, do you need knitted caps and gloves and scarves? The answer is no, we do not need those items. However, do you know what we do need is pressure cookers. And I'm not talking about Instant Pots. I'm talking about the pressure cooker that your grandma probably used, that we all have been taught, do not use these things. They will blow up your rice. Americans are afraid of pressure cookers. And so they're sitting on shelves at Salvation Armies and Goodwill thrift stores. That is what Afghan women used to cook with. They love pressure cookers. They've been using them since they were little girls. And so we are in need of pressure cookers. We're in need of sewing machines. There are women who miss sewing and know that that's a strong, smart way to make money in this city. There are 2 incredible sewing programs that will teach refugees how to sew and have been doing so for many years. They're called Rightfully Sewn and Once We Were Refugees. And their sewing programs where literally they're provided with education so they can become sewers and sew either commercial linens or do alterations on clothes. Those programs are literally lifting families out of poverty. because instead of there just being one earner in the family, there then becomes two earners in the family. Those programs are extremely powerful, but they're only really helpful if the women can get a sewing machine to practice on and to learn on. So we don't need what you might think we need. We do have very specific needs, and those needs can be discovered just by adding yourself to our email list, which you can do easily by going to our website and filling out the pop-up that shows up. I promise you, we will only email you probably at most 2 times a month, or by emailing me and asking me, do you need this item? Do you need this? I think one thing I also want you to know about your gifts and how to leverage your gifts to support refugees is that I think there's a real fear in the United States about working with people who do not speak your language, do not speak English. And what's so interesting and what I really learned is that the people that are intimidated by not knowing another language are Americans. If you've lived in a refugee camp or if you've lived anywhere other than the United States, you're used to encountering people who maybe don't even speak the same dialect of Dari that you speak. And so these people are extremely independent. They're really good at using their phones and translation services. They're really great at gesturing, and they're not intimidated by the fact that we don't speak Pashto or Dari at all. They look at Americans and they're like, well, of course you don't speak Pashto. Like, why would you? That is not a barrier to connection or community for these incredible survivors. And I've seen that not just in the Afghan community, but in the Somali community and the Sudanese Congolese community. So please know, if you're concerned about not knowing these languages, we're happy to provide you with translation services and connect you with resources to learn a little bit more. So I'm seeing some questions in the chat. I want to make sure to answer them. Yes, Craig, you have a client that speaks Swahili. Yes, we have a lot of Swahili speakers at Della. How can we co-sponsor or otherwise help refugees when we do not know their language and they do not know English? There we go. So I answered that question. That was perfectly timed, Craig. So here are the volunteer options at Della Lamb. We offer what are considered resettlement roles. So the first option there is house to home. There was a period of time where we were moving 4 and 5 families a week into their permanent home. We have a temporary housing facility, which is a hotel up in the Northland. And we only have about 80 people left in that hotel. And we will move all of those folks into their permanent housing by April the 1st. So we're actively moving those final refugees out of temporary housing, and house to home teams are the way that we've been able to do that. So a house to home team is a group of people who gather a set list of furniture. They can do that by shopping thrift stores, by gathering materials out of their own homes that they're ready to part with, or by going to Flourish Furnishings, which is the city's only furniture pantry. If you're not familiar with Flourish Furnishings, Joe, that would be a great opportunity for another forum speakers to have Rich from Flourish Furnishings come and speak, because their work is incredible. They're literally changing lives for a lot of different agencies here in Kansas City. You literally walk into a showroom as a client or as a case manager for any of the area domestic violence agencies, refugee resettlement agencies, veterans agencies here in Kansas City, and you're able to pick out your house. Anything that you might need, a couch, a bed, a kitchen table, housewares, linens, even down to decor and Christmas decorations. If you happen to celebrate Christmas, all of those things are available for you. It's a really incredible operation and something we're proud to partner with. So they're called Flourish Furnishings. So anyway, house to home volunteers, we're really winding down house to home needs. We'll always be moving refugees into homes. Please know that, but we don't have the volume that we were moving in December and January and the early part of February. Community sponsorship, we've already discussed. There is literally a community sponsorship coordinator at Della Lamb who does nothing but support community sponsorship groups. She's fantastic. Her name is Sarah Colstow. And she is really, really good at training and kind of motivating, mobilizing groups of people to support the needs of refugees. day-to-day support. There's community access. So I trained a group of transportation volunteers last week that all they're going to do is drive refugees to medical appointments, prenatal appointments, to get their eyes checked, dental appointments, job interviews, because until people get driver's licenses, they can take the bus that's free, but most people in the city do not know how to leverage the bus system. And so we are kind of mobilizing our own Uber system of drivers who are going to be assigned cases, and they will literally be driving people to their appointments. So we're so grateful for that. Those are considered community access volunteers. And then on-site volunteering, you can come and volunteer at Della. Our campus is at 500 Woodland, at the site where we're temporarily housing folks, or in one of the kind of community clusters where we've housed groups of refugees in apartment complexes all around the city, or in, there's a group of refugees that are housed in a cul-de-sac. They all live in duplexes in the same cul-de-sac. And so they're assigned community access volunteers or community sponsorship volunteers, or just day-to-day volunteers to help us do the work of refugee resettlement. If the refugees have pets at their home, is there a way for them to be able to bring their dogs with them? The answer to that, Craig, it depends. So let me give you a rationale for that answer. If you look at the Ukrainian refugees, for example, they were on foot. Okay, so they were on foot, and many Ukrainians are carrying their dogs with them. One of the things that, I'm sorry for that. One of the things that that really struck me about that conflict is that they were forced to depart on foot for the most part, or on trains. If you're hopping on a plane, you are unable to take your dog with you, right? So pets are not typically part of the conversation. Now, for those people who are helping Ukrainians resettle in Poland or in other parts of Europe, that is part of the conversation. They're talking about domesticated animals, right? But for the most part, you're unable to bring your pets with you. So here are the immediate needs of refugees: transportation, which we've discussed, daily support at the hotel, house to home teams, which is becoming less of a priority, and housing evaluators, people who are willing to work with property managers and landlords to ensure that the housing that we're placing people in is ready for inhabitants. A lot of times, because we're working with low-income housing, the units haven't been used in many, many years. And so we're talking about walking into a unit and the electricity hasn't been turned on, or, you know, they haven't reconnected the water line in a while, or the water hasn't been run in a while. So we're working with a group of people who are helping to evaluate and work with property managers and landlords all over the city. We do have an Amazon wish list. Amazon wish lists are great for nonprofit organizations. Most nonprofits have one. And the reason why they're so great is because it's just like a registry. It goes directly to us, and we can every single day change and adjust what's on our wish list based on the needs of very, very real people. So there are a variety of attitudes about Amazon. I'm not here to sell you on Amazon, but I'm here to sell you on the convenience of, if you want to do something today and send something that is going to be used immediately, then all you have to do is visit our Amazon wish list. And we've provided a QR code right there. So before we go to your next steps, I'm going to pause, and I am going to open up both the chat, and you can go off mute and ask me questions. I'd love to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, let me first, I'll break in here, Cori. Thank you so much. We've been listening to Cori Wallace. She's the engagement director for Della Community Services in Kansas City. And yeah, we will be turning it over to the audience for your questions. And I want to say also that next week, the forum will be talking about how restoring healthy soil can slow climate change. That's with Hillary Noonan, Sustainable Landscape Specialist, and with Mark Samborski and Antioch Urban Growers. And while we're waiting for some questions to come up, I guess, Cori, if I could ask one, when you talk about the incredible survivors, you talk about the trauma. how would you convey that? I mean, is there examples, or, you know, what's been hardest about this work, I guess, is what I'm asking you.
Yeah. I mean, what we train our staff to be responsive to and prepared for is an absolute physical, mental, and emotional sense of urgency at all times. Everything to someone who's been displaced and traumatized is an emergency. And it's a perceived emergency that's rooted in fear, right? So if you've been in fight or flight mode for months and months and months, literally, like, the only way for me to survive and to help my family survive is to operate in high stress flight or fight mode. Everything around you, everything that you need, everything that you want to gather or that you want to place your family in is an emergency. So our case managers most of them have been exposed to Afghan people before, or are part of the displaced community themselves, so they understand this. But the hardest part of this work for me, Joe, honestly, has been watching these case managers, oftentimes who are young, like literally, like, I don't know how to describe it, empathize with a refugee so much that then their fight or flight mode is agitated, right? So they're operating from everything is an emergency. I need this yesterday. And so seeing that it becomes a community of people that are in shared crisis with one another. And ultimately, as an agency, what our goal is to provide stability, support, and really kind of emotionally and practically responsive services. And so it's been really eye-opening for me as a nonprofit professional to watch very real people all become impacted by lack of safety. It's not just refugees that struggle, it's anyone who wants to support refugees. And that's been really eye-opening for me as a professional. Now, we have the luxury and privilege of walking away, right? There is no refugee who can walk away from their lived experience. And so that's important for me to say too. But I've worked in a number of nonprofit organizations all over the city. I've loved this work, and it's because I love Kansas City and I love what Kansas Cityans can do when they learn about how they can help. But this has been a very unique experience for me because there is no population that's been activated as much emotionally as people who've been traumatized for months and months and months, years and years and years, simply due to their identity over things they have no control over. So when you have a lack of control for many years, you translate that fear around lack of control onto everyone that encounters you. And you're stuck in feeling a lack of control. So that's why we focus so much on personal agency and independent choices. Yeah. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, sure. And there's also, you talk about like less than 1% of those who are actually make it out, you know, get settled. Yes. How frustrating is that? And is there ways that can be increased?
So that's an interesting question. 26 million people is a lot of people, and moving them through government systems that are not, I mean, you could make all kinds of arguments about how inefficient the United States is. Just for the sake of argument, I just want to say positive things about Canada, because Canada, believe it or not, Canada has done refugee resettlement extremely well for the last 30 years. We are just now starting to leverage their solutions to bring people in and ensure that they find safe harbor in Canada. We are balancing the scales in the United States after an administration that had a refugee resettlement cap of 30,000 people, right? So there were 4 years where the president determined, every president receives the privilege of presidential determination, meaning how many refugees are able to come to the United States. Canada was willing to accept around 100,000 refugees. During the previous presidential administration, our cap was set at around 30,000 people. That was an all-time low. So the presidential determination was at an all-time low during the previous presidential administration. In those 30,000 people, you could not be Muslim, and you couldn't come from a set group of countries, even if you weren't Muslim. That's not a lot of people. So you're asking me, like, how can we move more people into, how can we build on that fewer than 1% number? Well, we have to have real conversations about immigration, migration policy in the United States and in other countries. We have to work really, really hard to provide a rationale for the UNCR to place more refugees here. And the way that we do that is through creating an environment where people that are low income can survive in the United States. And not just survive, but really thrive. So we're really talking about layered issues surrounding poverty, surrounding people that don't speak English, surrounding people that are strangers to us, that don't have any ties to the United States, and that might have political, social, religious, or cultural identifiers or markers that are very, very different from ours. That's what we're really talking about here. Because there's 29 million refugees, and the reason why they haven't made it somewhere is because there's not places ready or able to receive them. And for many years, you could say that the United States was very much on that list. Yes, we do welcome, send us your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. We've said that in this country for many, many years. But there has been very, very specific policies that have made it extremely difficult to do that. And so what we need to do as a country, I think, is to really have conversations about those policies. And those policies are intertwined with policies around poverty and around low-income folks who don't have the resources to really activate votes in the same way that people with resources have the ability to activate and mobilize.
And you're talking there about like the systemic national limits. Are there anything that's limiting you specifically in Kansas City?
Yeah, so I mean, I know you had Mayor Lucas on do the state of the city, and you've had the mayor do the state of the city for many years. I know that Mayor Lucas talked about affordable housing. Affordable housing is not just a buzzword. It's not just affordable housing is really a huge barrier to many displaced people. And you could place people who are experiencing homelessness or people that are on the edge of homelessness as part of this group. Without affordable housing, without communities that are mixed income neighborhoods, communities that aren't just wealthy and aren't just what I call the emerging class, right? We don't have places to house refugees, period. There just needs to be physical spaces for these folks to live that are affordable and sustainable for family. I also think there needs to be a real conversation about how we educate a non-English speaker. So Kansas City Public Schools has done an incredible job of creating what are called sunshine classrooms, where if you're not familiar with Westernized education and you've never sat in a classroom that operates like a Western classroom operates, you have the opportunity to sit in what's called a sunshine classroom and learn about how we educate here in the West. And what's so interesting about that is it kind of layers in a lot of different social theories about social emotional learning and English language learning, really enculturating yourself in the United States without losing your identity. All of those things are addressed in those classrooms. But we need more of those classrooms, and we need those classrooms to exist in multiple districts. Because as I said before, there are a number of people who, once they discover like that they can move out of the historic Northeast and they can move to Parkville, or they can move to North Kansas City, or they can move down to Johnson County or out to Shawnee, or, you know, even further out to like a Paola or a Bonner Springs, they need resources to meet the needs of their kids. And we are an increasingly international community here in Kansas City. We have been for many years. And I think sometimes as Kansas Cityans, we have our blinders on. We have our blinders on about the richness of our community. And we're really missing out on acknowledging what an international population means. And so I'd like to see an increased attention in a variety of school districts on really educating kids that are not native to the United States.
Well, thanks for that, Cori. What else? How would you wrap this up? I mean, how would you want?
Yeah, so I would wrap this up by saying I'm going to go to the contact us list. So this is just the specifics around volunteering. But I'm going to go to how to contact me. We have this conversation once a month, and it's called Refugees Welcome. You can go to our social media, or you can go to our calendar, which is on our website, to sign up for another conversation like this, or to reference this with a friend or family member that you think should attend. Tomorrow at noon, we're hosting a call on employing refugees. So if you're curious about how to employ refugees, or you know of an employer here in the Kansas City Metro that you think should be on that call, please know you can register for that. We are open for business all the time. So if you're thinking, you know what, it's really good timing that Cori has come to talk to us right after the Ukrainian crisis. I got to tell you, Joe reached out to me months ago, when we were just going to be talking about Afghanistan. And so I want you to know we're open for business, and we have been doing this work since 2014, and we'll continue to do this work with the help of Kansas Cityans. And so I urge you to reach out to me if you have a passion for this work, or you just want to learn more. I'm here to help you, and I'd love to answer any of your questions offline.
All right, thank you. We've been listening to Cori Wallace, the Engagement Director from Della Land Community Services in Kansas City. Thank you again, Cori, and thanks everybody.
Thanks.